Imagine sending invitations to your entire class, decorating your house, baking a cake, and then sitting alone as the sun goes down. That's what happened to 12-year-old Ben on his birthday. His mom tried to hide her tears. A neighbor watched from across the street. And then, something incredible happened. 50 motorcycles rolled onto his quiet street, and everything changed. Ben Harris had perfected the art of being invisible. Not the superhero kind, the other kind. The kind where you time your arrival to homeroom so you're neither early enough to stand around awkwardly nor late enough to have everyone's eyes on you when you walk in. The kind where you've memorized which bathroom stalls the popular kids never use and which water fountain has the shortest line. On this particular Thursday morning, 3 months and 4 days after moving to Riverside Middle School, Ben sat at his desk with a stack of handmade birthday invitations. 30 of them. One for every kid in his 7th grade class. He'd spent 2 weeks making them, working at the Kit Foster table after his mom fell asleep. Each invitation was decorated with colored pencils. His best attempt at drawing a motorcycle, because that's what his dad used to ride before the deployment. Before the sand and the convoys and the messages that always ended with "love you, buddy, see you soon," but never said when soon actually was. The invitations had all the details. Saturday, 3 p.m., his address in the Oakmont subdivision. Pizza, cake, games written in his neatest handwriting. At the bottom of each one, he'd added, "Hope you can make it." That exclamation point had taken him 15 minutes to decide on. Too eager? Not eager enough? In the end, he figured it looked friendly without being desperate. During lunch, while the cafeteria erupted in its usual chaos of shouting and laughter and trays clattering, Ben made his move. He'd wrapped the invitations in groups of 5 with rubber bands. Table by table, he walked through the room, placing them down quickly and moving on before anyone could react. He didn't make eye contact, didn't explain, just dropped them and kept walking. At the athletes' table, Austin Foster glanced at the invitation, smirked, and slid it under his tray. The girls by the window, the ones who always traveled in a pack, picked theirs up with curiosity, whispering to each other. Ben couldn't hear what they said, didn't want to. By the time he sat down at his usual spot, a table near the emergency exit where the overhead light flickered, his hands were shaking slightly. He unwrapped his sandwich and stared at it, not particularly hungry, just needing something to do with his hands. "That was brave," a voice said. Ben looked up. Mrs. Foster, the school counselor and coincidentally Austin's aunt, stood there with a lunch tray of her own. She sometimes ate in the cafeteria, claiming she liked the ambience. Ben suspected she was just keeping an eye on kids like him. "The invitations," she clarified, sitting down without asking. "That took guts." Ben shrugged. "It's just a birthday party." Still, she opened her carton of milk. "Hope you have a great turnout." Something in her voice made Ben's stomach tighten. That tone, soft around the edges, like wrapping bad news in cotton. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Me too." Saturday arrived with perfect weather, the kind of crisp October afternoon that made everything feel possible. Sophie Harris had taken the day off from her double shift at the hospital to help Ben set up. Together, they strung lights across the backyard fence, arranged folding chairs in clusters, and set up a folding table with a vinyl tablecloth decorated with racing stripes. The cake sat in the center, chocolate with vanilla frosting, homemade because the bakery was too expensive and because Sophie remembered Ben's dad always said her cakes were better anyway. She'd written "Happy 12th Birthday, Ben," in blue icing, each letter taking twice as long as it should. "What time did you say on the invitations?" Sophie asked, adjusting a balloon for the 3rd time. 3 o'clock. "And it's..." She checked her phone. 2:30 now. Okay, good. That gives us time to..." "Mom." Ben touched her arm. "It looks great. Really." She smiled, but he could see the worry in her eyes. The same worry that lived there when she checked her phone for messages from Dad, when she paid bills at the Kit Foster table late at night, when she thought Ben wasn't watching. 15 minutes past the hour, the backyard was still empty. "Traffic probably," Sophie said. rearranging the paper plates that didn't need rearranging. Nearly an hour later, Ben had moved to the front porch steps, watching the street. Car passed, then another. Neither one slowed down. When the shadows started stretching long, Sophie brought out the cake with candles already lit, her smile too bright, her voice too cheerful. "Make a wish, birthday boy." Ben looked at the flickering candles, at his mother's desperate hopefulness, at the empty chairs and untouched party favors scattered across the table. He closed his eyes and blew. Dad here. Someone, anyone showing up. An end to this constant, crushing loneliness. He didn't say it out loud. Wishes didn't work that way. Sophie cut 2 slices, and they sat in lawn chairs as the sun dropped lower, casting long shadows across the decorations that suddenly looked cheap and sad in the fading light. Neither of them ate much. Across the street, in a garage cluttered with motorcycle parts and old memories, Frankie Reeves stood in the doorway with a wrench still in his oil-stained hand. He'd watched the whole thing, the setup, the waiting, the candles, the defeat. He'd seen that look before, on the faces of kids in base towns when their parents deployed, on the faces of veterans at the VA hospital who sat alone in waiting rooms, on his own son's face years ago when Frankie chose the road over a school play. The kid was blowing out birthday candles alone, and something about that image wouldn't let go. Frankie looked at his phone, at a contact he hadn't called in 3 years. His thumb hovered over the name. Then he pressed dial. Frankie's garage smelled like motor oil, old leather, and regret. He stood there in the dark for a solid minute after watching Ben and his mother disappear inside their house, the porch light clicking off like the final period on a sad sentence. The wrench felt heavy in his hand. Everything felt heavy. He flicked on the overhead fluorescent, and the space came to life in stuttering bursts of light. A 1983 shovelhead sat half-assembled on the center workbench, parts organized in coffee cans with labels written in his ex-wife's handwriting from 15 years ago. He'd never had the heart to replace them. On the back wall, underneath a calendar stuck permanently on July 2019, hung a framed photograph. The Asphalt Reapers, 2008. 17 riders lined up in front of their bikes at a rest stop outside Barstow. Frankie stood forth from the left, younger, broader in the shoulders with Crash beside him. His road captain, his brother, the man he'd ridden with for 12 years before everything fell apart. The falling apart hadn't been dramatic. No betrayal, no blow-up. Just life pulling in different directions. Crash wanted to keep the club riding hard. Long hauls, fundraisers, poker runs across state lines. Frankie wanted to slow down, be around more for Jason, his son who was 16 and starting to look at colleges. But by the time Frankie hung up his patch, Jason had already learned to stop expecting him at baseball games. The irony wasn't lost on Frankie. He'd quit riding to be a better father right when his son stopped caring if he showed up. That was 3 years ago. Jason was 19 now, living 2 hours away, working construction and answering Frankie's texts with one-word responses when he answered at all. Frankie picked up his phone, scrolled to Crash's contact. His thumb hovered. "What are you gonna say, old man?" "Hey, remember me? The guy who walked away. Need a favor." He locked the phone, set it down, picked up a socket wrench instead and went back to the shovelhead, trying to lose himself in the rhythm of mechanical work. But his hands wouldn't cooperate. He kept seeing that kid on the porch. The way his shoulders had curved inward when he blew out those candles. The way his mother had tried so damn hard to hold it together. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Finally, Frankie threw the wrench down with a clang that echoed through the garage. He grabbed his phone and dialed before he could talk himself out of it. 3 rings. 4. Then, "This better be good, it's past 11. Crash's voice hadn't changed. Rough as asphalt, the kind of voice that made you listen even when you didn't want to. "It's Frankie." Silence. Then, "Reeves? That really you?" "Yeah, it's me." More silence, this one uncomfortable. "Been a while. Too long." Frankie had counted every month, though he'd never admit it. "Listen, I know I got no right calling, but you good? Everything okay?" The concern in Crash's voice nearly broke Frankie. No accusation, no bitterness. Just immediate worry for a brother who'd walked away. I'm fine. It's not about me. Frankie took a breath. There's this kid across the street. Army brat, dad's deployed. He threw himself a birthday party today. Made invitations, the whole deal. Not a single person showed up. Crash. Not one. He heard Crash exhale slowly on the other end. I watched him blow out candles alone with his mom, Frankie continued. And I just couldn't look away. Kid's 12 years old and he's already got that look. You know the one. Yeah, Crash said quietly. I know the one. His dad's driving convoys overseas. Kid probably hasn't seen him in a year. And these punk kids at his school couldn't even. Frankie's voice caught. He cleared his throat. I know it's been a long time. I know I don't have the right to ask. But this kid needs something. Someone. And I thought maybe, when's his actual birthday? Was today. Then we're already late. Frankie heard movement on the other end. Crash was already on his feet. Tomorrow work? Give me time to make some calls. Frankie's chest tightened with something that might have been relief or gratitude or just the feeling of not being alone for the first time in 3 years. Tomorrow works. Crash, save it. Send me the address. And Frankie? Good to hear your voice, brother. The line went dead. Across town, Sophie sat on Ben's bed in the dark, listening to him breathe. The rhythm was wrong, too controlled, but she let him pretend. She didn't know what to say that wouldn't sound hollow. Her phone buzzed. The family readiness group chat was active. Other military spouses sharing deployment updates, arranging playdates for kids whose parents were overseas, offering support. Sophie had joined when they first moved here but rarely participated. Everyone seemed to already know each other, have established friendships. She was always arriving late to conversations, missing inside jokes. Tonight, she typed, anyone else's kids struggling with making friends at new school? She waited. 3 minutes. 5. No responses appeared. Sophie deleted the message unsent. At midnight, she heard something at the front door. Not a knock, but a soft scraping sound. She went downstairs, checked the peephole, saw nothing. When she opened the door, a folded piece of paper lay on the welcome mat. The handwriting was rough but legible. Tomorrow, 6 p.m. Trust me. Your neighbor in the garage. Sophie stood there in her bathrobe, note in hand, streetlight casting long shadows across the empty cul-de-sac. She didn't know Frankie well, had seen him working in his garage, had waved a few times. He'd helped jump her car once when the battery died. Trust him? She didn't even know him. But then again, 30 kids hadn't shown up today. The established order of things hadn't exactly worked out. She folded the note, looked across at the dark garage, and thought, 30 kids already said no. What's one more risk? Sophie spent Sunday morning pretending everything was normal. Pancakes for breakfast. Laundry folded on the couch. Ben played video games in his room with the door closed, and she didn't push him to come out. But that note sat on the Kit Foster counter, and her eyes kept drifting to it. 6 p.m. Trust me. At 3 o'clock, she finally knocked on Ben's door. Hey, sweetie. Want to help me clean up the backyard? Not really. She opened the door anyway. Ben sat cross-legged on his bed, controller idle in his lap, staring at nothing. Ben, I was thinking, can we not have another party? Ever? His voice was flat, drained of the hopefulness that had carried him through invitation making and decorating. I don't want to do that again. Sophie sat on the edge of his bed. I know yesterday was hard. It wasn't hard, Mom. It just was what it is. He picked at a loose thread on his comforter. I'm the new kid, the weird kid. Dad's gone and we don't know anyone, and that's how it is. The resignation in his voice hurt worse than tears would have. What if I told you something might happen today? Something good? Ben looked at her with the kind of skepticism only a disappointed 12-year-old could muster. Like what? I don't know exactly, but our neighbor left a note. He said to trust him. The mechanic guy? Yeah, Mr. Reeves. Ben shrugged. Okay, whatever. By 5:30, Sophie had changed clothes twice, settled on jeans and a sweater, then felt ridiculous for carrying what she wore. Ben had migrated to the living room, textbook open but eyes on the window. At 5:45, the air changed. It started as a feeling more than a sound, a vibration that rattled the windows, a low frequency that you felt in your chest before you heard it with your ears. Sophie walked to the front door, Ben right behind her. The rumble grew louder, deeper, closer. Neighbors began emerging from houses, faces confused and curious. Mrs. Patterson from 2 doors down stood on her lawn with pruning shears still in hand. The Kowalski's teenage son came out filming on his phone. Then they appeared at the end of the cul-de-sac. 1 motorcycle, then 2, then 5, 10, 20. A rolling thunder of chrome and leather and controlled power. They came in formation, engines synchronized, taking the turn onto the street with practiced precision. Ben's mouth fell open. 50 motorcycles filled the quiet suburban street, lining both sides in perfect rows. Harleys mostly, Softails and Dynas, Road Kings and Street Glides, their engines settling into a rhythmic idle that sounded like the heartbeat of something massive and alive. The riders dismounted, men and women ranging from their 30s to their 60s, all wearing leather vests with a patch on the back, a grinning skull with wings, and the words Asphalt Reapers MC. Sophie's hand found Ben's shoulder. She had no idea what was happening. From the center of the formation, a tall man with a gray beard walked forward, flanked by Frankie. The bearded man, Crash, though Sophie didn't know that yet, stopped at their walkway and removed his sunglasses. "You must be Ben," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle for someone who looked like he could arm wrestle a bear. "We heard you had a birthday yesterday. That true?" Ben nodded, unable to form words. "Well, we also heard nobody showed up. And that?" Crash shook his head. "That's unacceptable. So we figured we'd come today instead. Hope that's all right." Before Ben could respond, the bikers moved into action with the efficiency of a military operation. Saddlebags opened, revealing Nerf guns, water balloons, wrapped presents, grocery bags full of hot dog buns and chips. Portable grill materialized. Someone started inflating balloons with a hand pump. Kids, the bikers' own children and grandchildren, appeared from nowhere, suddenly surrounding Ben with a football and a frisbee. "You ever been on a bike, kid?" Frankie appeared beside Ben, gesturing toward his restored '87 Harley. Ben shook his head, eyes still wide with disbelief. "Well, come on then." Sophie started to protest, but one of the female riders, a woman with gray-streaked hair and kind eyes, touched her arm. "They'll go slow, promise. I'm Diane, by the way, Crash's wife. You look like you could use a drink." She pressed a bottle of lemonade into Sophie's hand, and suddenly Sophie was surrounded by women, bikers' wives and girlfriends, who seemed to understand without explanation what she'd been carrying alone. Ben climbed onto the back of Frankie's bike, helmet secured, arms wrapped tentatively around the older man's waist. The engine rumbled to life, and they rolled slowly down the street and back, Ben's face transforming from nervousness to pure joy. Other riders took turns giving him rides. Each time Ben returned, his smile was bigger, his voice louder. The shy kid from yesterday was disappearing, replaced by someone Sophie barely recognized, someone who laughed freely and high-fived strangers. The barbecue fired up. Burgers and hot dogs sizzled. Someone brought out a speaker, and classic rock drifted through the cooling evening air. The entire neighborhood had come out now, drawn by curiosity and staying for the spectacle of community. Then Tank, a barrel-chested rider with a prosthetic leg visible below his jeans, approached Ben carrying a laptop. "Got someone who wants to talk to you, kid." He opened the screen, tapped twice. The connection stuttered, buffered. Then, desert camo, tired eyes, Dad's face breaking through pixels and satellite delay. The entire street fell silent. "Hey buddy," Ben's dad said, his voice breaking. "Happy birthday." Ben's expression faltered for half a second before setting like concrete. "Dad, there's like 50 motorcycles here. I can see that. His father's eyes were wet. Looks like you made some good friends. Behind Ben's dad on the screen, other soldiers had gathered, watching. One of them saluted the camera. Then another. Then all of them. A row of deployed service members saluting the bikers who'd shown up for one of their own. Crash stepped into frame beside Ben and saluted back, followed by every Reaper on the street standing and returning the gesture. Sophie covered her mouth, tears streaming freely now. Ben and his father talked about school, about the bikes, about nothing and everything. Time stopped matching. When they finally said goodbye, Ben didn't fall apart. He turned to the crowd of leather-clad strangers and said, clear and strong, "Thank you. You're family now, kid," Crash said simply. That's what family does. Monday morning hit Ben's middle school like wildfire in dry grass. By the time the first bell rang, half the 7th grade had already seen the videos. Shaky phone footage of 50 motorcycles lined up on a residential street, a kid in a helmet waving from the back of a Harley, bikers flipping burgers like it was the most natural thing in the world. Ben walked through the front doors wearing his backpack, and on it, safety pinned with care, was a custom patch. The Asphalt Reaper skull logo, miniaturized with LIL wrench, embroidered across the bottom in silver thread. Frankie had presented it to him Sunday night before the bikes rolled out, making him an honorary member in front of everyone. The hallway conversations didn't stop when Ben passed. They shifted. Heads turned. Whispers followed. That's him. Dude, is that real? My mom said there were like 100 bikes. Ben kept his head up, shoulders back. The hallway felt smaller than it used to. In homeroom, Chelsea Morrison, who'd thrown her invitation in the recycling bin without opening it, leaned across the aisle. So, was that party thing real? The bikers. Yeah, Ben said simply. That's actually really cool. At lunch, Ben headed for his usual table by the emergency exit, tray in hand, expecting the familiar solitude. Instead, he found Tyler and Gwyn already sitting there, the kid who sometimes drew comic book characters in the margins of his math homework. Mind if I sit? Tyler asked, then laughed. I mean, I'm already sitting, but is this cool? Ben set his tray down. Yeah, it's cool. Within 5 minutes, 3 more kids had joined them. Then 2 more. By the time Ben finished his sandwich, 8 people surrounded the table, all asking questions about the bikes, the riders, what it felt like to go on a Harley. Austin Foster appeared, standing at the edge of the group with his usual pack of athletes. Ben braced himself for the mockery, the dismissive comment that would deflate this fragile new reality. Instead, Austin said, "My aunt told me what happened. Mrs. Foster, the counselor, she said those bikers were legit. Like, do charity rides and everything." They do, Ben confirmed. One of them, Tank, he's a veteran. Lost his leg in Afghanistan. Austin nodded slowly, something like respect crossing his face. That's pretty badass, man. He paused, then added, "Sorry I didn't come to your party. That was, sorry. Not a parade." Just 2 words that shifted the ground under Ben's feet. After school, Ben walked to Frankie's garage as instructed. The bay door was open, and Frankie stood over a disassembled carburetor, parts laid out on a greasy towel. "Right on time," Frankie said without looking up. "You remember what I showed you about the fuel mixture?" Ben picked up the wrench he'd been using yesterday. Idle screw clockwise to lean it out, counterclockwise to re-foster it. Quick learner. Frankie handed him a part. "Hold this steady." They worked in comfortable silence, the kind that didn't need filling. Ben had discovered he liked the logic of mechanical work, how problems had solutions, how effort produced visible results. Footsteps on the driveway made them both look up. A younger man stood there, mid-20s, work boots and a faded Carhartt jacket, hands shoved deep in his pockets. He had Frankie's jawline, his eyes. "Hey, Dad," the man said awkwardly. Frankie straightened slowly, wrench still in hand. "Jason. Saw the video. Mom sent it to me." Jason shifted his weight. "Thought I don't know. Wanted to see if you needed help with anything." The air between them was thick with 3 years of unspoken words, missed calls, and the specific kind of pain that exists between fathers and sons who love each other but don't know how to bridge the gap. Could use another set of hands on this, Dinah, Frankie said carefully. If you've got time. Jason nodded, stepping into the garage. He noticed Ben, smiled. You the birthday kid? Yeah, Ben. Jason. This old man teaching you anything useful? Tons, Ben said honestly. Jason picked up a socket wrench, examined the bike, and just like that, the three of them fell into the rhythm of work. Father and son moved around each other with the muscle memory of 1,000 past projects, before everything got complicated. At Sophie's house, her phone buzzed with a text from Diane. Coffee tomorrow? Some of us wives meet Tuesdays at the diner. Sophie stared at the message, then typed, I'd like that. 3 dots appeared. Then good. You're one of us now. That evening, Ben sat at the Kit Foster table doing homework while Sophie made dinner. Through the window, they could see Frankie's garage. 3 figures bent over a motorcycle, working together, the space between them shrinking with every past tool and shared task. Mom, Ben said without looking up from his math worksheet. Yeah, sweetie? I'm glad we moved here. Sophie turned from the stove, surprised. Yeah. He twirled his pencil. I mean, it sucked at first, but now, I don't know. It feels like maybe things are going to be okay. Sophie walked over and kissed the top of his head. I think you're right. Outside, Frankie handed Jason a torque wrench, and their fingers touched briefly in the exchange. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, not yet. But it was a start, the kind of repair work that happened slowly, carefully, one small adjustment at a time. Ben's phone buzzed with a group text from Tyler. You coming to the park this weekend? Bringing a football. He responded, yeah, I'll be there. Ben Harris wasn't invisible anymore. He wasn't the new kid, the weird kid, the kid whose dad was gone. He was Lil Wrench, the boy who'd been alone until 50 motorcycles taught an entire neighborhood what showing up really meant. And that made all the difference. That night, Ben fell asleep with grease still under his fingernails and the rumble of 50 engines still echoing in his chest. He didn't check his phone to see who'd texted, didn't calculate hallway routes to avoid crowds, didn't make himself small. The sound in his memory, that thunder of belonging, drowned out everything else. Community isn't about who you've known the longest. It's about who shows up when you need them most. What would you do if you saw a lonely kid at a party with no guests? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe to embrace the journey for more stories that prove humanity is still beautiful.